There's a kind of man society doesn't talk about anymore, not because he failed, but because he never made noise. He didn't complain, he didn't collapse, he just carried things quietly. And when men like that stop showing up, people don't notice at first, until everything feels heavier. Section 1. The men you never notice. There's a kind of man most people don't see anymore, not because he's rare, but because he's quiet. He doesn't announce himself. He doesn't argue online. He doesn't perform outrage or demand attention. He just shows up on time, every day, without applause. These are the men society forgot, not the loud ones, not the broken ones, not the ones constantly talking about themselves. The ones who work, adapt, absorb and continue, without needing to be witnessed. You pass them every day without realizing it. The man who fixes things without complaining. The man who carries responsibility without posting about it. The man who learned long ago that speaking less creates fewer problems. He isn't mysterious. He isn't trying to be interesting. He's stable, and stability doesn't trend. In a culture that rewards volume, the quiet man disappears into the background. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't center himself in every conversation, so people assume he has nothing to say. That assumption is wrong. Quiet men aren't silent because they lack thoughts. They're silent because they've learned something most people haven't. Not every thought needs an audience. Not every emotion needs to be displayed. Not every disagreement needs to be won. They learned this through experience, through work environments where speaking up changed nothing, through relationships where explaining themselves only created more friction, through years of watching noise get rewarded while consistency was ignored. So they adjusted. They didn't become angry. They didn't become resentful. They became economical with their energy. This is the first thing society misunderstands about quiet men. Silence isn't withdrawal, it's filtration. They speak when it matters. They act when words fail. They move without asking for permission. And because they don't signal their value loudly, they're often mistaken for being replaceable. That's the mistake. Quiet men are usually the ones holding things together. They're the ones who keep systems running when enthusiasm fades. They're the ones who remain when others chase recognition. They're the ones who don't leave when things become inconvenient. But because they don't narrate their effort, it goes unnoticed. Society has slowly confused visibility with value. The loudest voice gets attention. The strongest opinion gets amplified. The most emotional reaction gets rewarded. Meanwhile, the man who prevents problems before they happen gets ignored until he stops. This is why the quiet men society forgot aren't gone. They're still here, they're just no longer explaining themselves. They've learned that being dependable doesn't earn appreciation anymore. It earns expectation. So they reduced their visibility. They stopped volunteering opinions, stopped justifying decisions, stopped trying to be understood by people who weren't listening anyway. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. They realized something subtle but important. Attention doesn't equal respect, and silence doesn't equal weakness. In fact, silence is often where strength goes to conserve itself. The quiet man isn't trying to be chosen. He isn't trying to be praised. He isn't trying to be validated. He's trying to live without unnecessary friction, and in a noisy world, that makes him invisible. But invisibility isn't absence, it's positioning. And when you understand who these men are, how much they carry, how little they ask for, and how easily they're overlooked, you begin to see the foundation most people are standing on without realizing it. That foundation doesn't shout, it holds. Section 2. Why silence was mistaken for weakness. At some point, silence stopped being respected. It didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, as culture changed its definition of strength. Strength used to look like restraint, like composure, like knowing when not to speak. Now, strength is often mistaken for volume. The loudest voice in the room is assumed to be the strongest. The most expressive emotion is assumed to be the most authentic. The most visible struggle is assumed to be the most important. In that shift, quiet men lost their signal. They didn't change. The environment did. Silence used to mean confidence. Now it's often labeled as avoidance. Calm used to mean control. Now it's often mistaken for indifference. And men who didn't adapt to this new language of performance were quietly misclassified. A quiet man doesn't argue to prove he's right. He watches to see what matters. He doesn't raise his voice to be heard. He waits to see who's actually listening. He doesn't explain himself repeatedly. He adjusts his behavior once and moves on. But in a culture that rewards constant expression, these traits look passive. They're not. They're selective. Quiet men learned early that not every conversation leads to understanding. Some conversations only create noise, so they stopped participating in those. They stopped defending their intentions to people committed to misunderstanding them. They stopped explaining boundaries to people who benefited from crossing them. This wasn't surrender, it was efficiency. But efficiency doesn't photograph well. It doesn't trend. It doesn't generate applause. So it was rebranded as weakness. Silence became something to be fixed. Calm became something to be interrogated. You should speak up more. You should express yourself. You should explain how you feel. Quiet men heard this advice and noticed something important. The people asking for explanations weren't listening for understanding. They were listening for leverage. So the quiet men withdrew further, not emotionally, strategically. They learned that silence protects clarity. When you speak less, your words carry weight. When you explain less, your boundaries hold better. When you react less, people reveal more about themselves. This is why silence scares people now. It can't be debated. It can't be manipulated easily. It doesn't provide material to push against. A quiet man doesn't offer emotional handles, and in a culture that has grown used to pulling them, that feels threatening. So silence was reframed as something negative. If a man doesn't respond immediately, he's detached. If he doesn't explain himself, he's avoidant. If he doesn't engage emotionally, he's broken. These labels say more about the environment than the man, because silence in the right hands is not absence, it's presence without performance. Quiet men didn't lose their voices, they stopped wasting them. They learned that some rooms don't deserve conversation, they deserve distance. They learned that explaining themselves repeatedly didn't lead to respect, it led to entitlement, so they became harder to read, not because they were hiding something, but because they were done being translated incorrectly. And that's where the misunderstanding deepened. People assumed quiet men had nothing inside. In reality, they had too much to give away cheaply. Silence wasn't their weakness, it was their filter, and the men who mastered it quietly stepped out of a culture that no longer knew how to measure strength without noise. They didn't announce that decision, they didn't argue about it, they just adjusted their presence, and that adjustment is what made them disappear from view. Not because they stopped existing, but because society stopped recognizing strength that didn't demand attention. Section 3. The men who didn't leave, they withdrew. When people talk about men disappearing, they imagine absence. They imagine men leaving jobs, leaving relationships, leaving society. That's not what happened. Most quiet men didn't leave, they withdrew. They're still at work, still paying bills, still showing up when it matters. They just stopped offering parts of themselves that were never protected. Withdrawal looks like less talking, not less caring. Less explaining, not less responsibility. Less emotional availability to chaos, not less commitment to life. This is where the misunderstanding becomes costly, because a withdrawn man looks functional from the outside. He's not making noise, he's not causing problems, he's not asking for help, so people assume he's fine. But withdrawal isn't comfort, it's containment. Quiet men learned that being open often meant being drained, so they learned to compartmentalize. Work stayed at work, emotions stayed internal, opinions stayed private, not because they didn't have them, but because sharing them had consequences. They noticed a pattern early on. The more they explained themselves, the more they were misunderstood. The more they expressed vulnerability, the more it was used against them later. The more they tried to communicate better, the more responsibility they absorbed. So they adapted, they reduced surface area, they stopped narrating their thoughts, stopped offering emotional context, stopped volunteering inner states to people who treated them like resources instead of humans. This wasn't bitterness, it was survival. Quiet men didn't withdraw because they were weak, they withdrew because they were strong enough to notice what was happening. They noticed that effort without boundaries becomes expectation, that reliability becomes entitlement, that silence becomes invisible labor, so they kept doing what was necessary and stopped doing what was optional. They fulfilled obligations, they maintained structure, they kept systems running, but they stopped overextending emotionally. This is why so many people felt a shift but couldn't name it. The man was still there, but something was missing. What was missing wasn't love, it was excess. Excess explanation, excess accommodation, excess emotional labor. Quiet men didn't stop caring, they stopped bleeding, and because they didn't announce that shift, it went unnoticed. Society tends to respond only to disruption. When someone breaks down, attention appears. When someone explodes, concern follows. But when someone withdraws calmly, quietly, responsibly, there's no alarm, so no one asks what changed. They assume nothing did. That assumption is wrong. Inside, these men became more guarded. Not closed, guarded. They learned that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They learned that peace requires limits, and those limits often look like silence to people who benefited from unlimited access before. Quiet men didn't stop contributing, they stopped subsidizing. They stopped filling emotional gaps for others at the cost of themselves. They stopped carrying weight that wasn't acknowledged. And because they did it without drama, without complaint, without confrontation, it was mistaken for indifference. But indifference doesn't maintain responsibility. Indifference doesn't keep showing up. Withdrawal does. Quiet men are still holding the structure. They're just no longer standing in the spotlight. And that's the danger. When the most stable people withdraw quietly, systems don't collapse immediately. They weaken slowly, silently, from the inside, and by the time anyone notices, they don't know who to ask to step forward anymore. Because the men who used to carry things without recognition have learned to carry less on purpose. Section 4. What quiet men actually carry. Quiet men are often described as simple, low maintenance, easygoing, unaffected. That description misses the truth. Quiet men aren't light because they carry nothing. They're light because they carry everything internally. They are containers. They carry responsibility without announcing it, pressure without dramatizing it, consequences without outsourcing them. And because they don't externalize the weight, most people never see it. A quiet man is often the one absorbing instability, so others don't have to. At work, he's the one who fixes mistakes without blaming. In families, he's the one who keeps routines intact when emotions fluctuate. In relationships, he's the one who stays grounded while others react. This doesn't come from emotional absence, it comes from discipline. Quiet men learned early that expressing every frustration doesn't reduce it, it spreads it. So they learned containment. They regulate themselves so environments stay functional. They don't offload stress onto others. They don't look for emotional witnesses. They don't demand reassurance for every burden they carry. They just adjust and move forward. That's what makes them reliable. But reliability has a hidden cost. When someone carries weight consistently, it stops being noticed. It becomes assumed. People don't ask how the quiet man is doing. They assume he's fine because he always has been. They don't check in. They don't slow down for him. They don't ask what it costs him to remain steady. They just keep leaning. Quiet men carry responsibility without recognition, stability without support, pressure without release. And because they don't complain, they're given more tasks, more expectations, more emotional responsibility, until something changes internally, not a breakdown, not an outburst, a recalibration. Quiet men eventually realize that carrying everything doesn't make them valued, it makes them useful. And usefulness is not the same as being respected. So they begin to adjust the load. They don't drop it all. They're not reckless. They just stop picking up what isn't theirs. They stop managing emotions they didn't create. They stop compensating for dysfunction they didn't cause. They stop being the stabilizer in systems that never stabilized them back. This doesn't look dramatic from the outside. From the outside, the man is still calm, still composed, still reliable. But internally, he's doing something new. He's prioritizing self-preservation. Quiet men don't crave recognition. They crave fairness. They don't need applause. They need balance. And when balance doesn't exist, silence becomes a shield. This is why quiet men seem distant over time. They're not disconnecting from life. They're disconnecting from overexposure. They've learned that carrying less doesn't make them selfish. It makes them sustainable. And sustainability is what keeps them functioning long after louder people burn out. Quiet men don't collapse publicly. They don't ask for rescue. They adapt silently. They simplify. They reduce. They narrow their world to what they can carry without breaking. This is what society rarely sees. By the time a quiet man says no, he has already said yes too many times internally. By the time he withdraws, he has already calculated the cost of staying visible. By the time he stops explaining, he has already realized explanation never changed the outcome. Quiet men don't carry less because they stopped caring. They carry less because they finally understood what was costing them the most. And what they protected wasn't ego, it was longevity. Section 5. Why society needs quiet men, but doesn't reward them. Modern society runs on stability. It rarely acknowledges. It depends on systems that don't fail, on routines that hold, on people who don't panic when things go wrong. Quiet men are at the center of that. They're the ones who keep processes moving when enthusiasm fades. They're the ones who absorb friction so outcomes remain predictable. They're the ones who don't need constant supervision to stay consistent. But consistency doesn't attract attention. It creates an illusion that nothing is happening. When something works quietly, people stop noticing the effort behind it. They assume it's automatic. They assume it's easy. They assume it will always be there. This is the paradox of quiet men. The more reliable they are, the less visible they become. Society rewards innovation over maintenance, expression over execution, visibility over dependability. Quiet men specialize in the opposite. They maintain what others build. They execute what others propose. They stabilize what others disrupt. But maintenance doesn't come with applause. There's no celebration for things that didn't break. No praise for problems that never surfaced. No recognition for emotional restraint that prevented escalation. So quiet men are rarely rewarded for what they prevent. They're only noticed when they stop. This is where the imbalance forms. Quiet men give society something it relies on, but society gives them very little back, not materially, not emotionally, not culturally. They're told to speak up if they want recognition, but speaking up often contradicts the very traits that make them effective. They're told to advocate for themselves, but advocating in noisy systems often means competing in ways they never wanted to. So many quiet men choose a third option. They keep contributing, but they stop expecting acknowledgement. That sounds noble, but it has consequences. When contribution is disconnected from reward, motivation erodes quietly, not all at once, gradually. The man still does his job, still fulfills obligations, but he stops offering extra. He stops stepping in early, stops absorbing excess responsibility, stops compensating for dysfunction that isn't his. And because he does it calmly, society doesn't notice the shift until something starts failing. This is why quiet men matter more than people realize. They are the buffer. They prevent chaos from reaching the surface. They smooth transitions. They absorb volatility. And when that buffer thins, systems become fragile, deadlines slip, standards drop, conflicts escalate faster. People ask, why does everything feel unstable now? They rarely look for the answer in the men who stopped over-functioning. Society didn't lose these men. It stopped rewarding them. And when reward disappears, even the most disciplined contributors recalibrate, not because they want to punish anyone, but because sustainability demands it. Quiet men don't need praise, but they do need reciprocity. They need to know that carrying weight doesn't make them invisible, that restraint isn't mistaken for absence, that stability has value beyond convenience. When that recognition doesn't exist, quiet men don't revolt. They retreat. They narrow their scope. They reduce exposure. They protect energy. And society continues forward, unaware that it's running on a smaller margin than before. This is the danger of forgetting the quiet men, not because they'll complain, but because they won't. They'll simply stop holding more than their share, and when too many of them make that decision at once, the systems that depended on their silence begin to show cracks. Not loudly, but slowly. Section 6. Why quiet men stop explaining themselves. Quiet men don't stop explaining themselves because they become arrogant. They stop because explanation stopped working. At first they try, they clarify intentions, they offer context. They slow down conversations so they won't be misunderstood. They assume good faith, but over time, a pattern becomes clear. The more they explain, the less they're heard. The more they justify, the more they're questioned. The more they clarify, the more their words are dissected instead of understood, so they begin to notice something important. Explanation doesn't create respect, it often invites scrutiny. In environments that reward noise, explanation becomes an opening, not for understanding but for control. Quiet men learn this through repetition. They explain a boundary and it's challenged. They explain a decision and it's negotiated. They explain a feeling and it's reframed against them later, so they adjust, not by becoming hostile, not by becoming distant, by becoming brief. They answer what's asked and nothing more. They state decisions without narrative. They let actions speak because words were being twisted. This is where people get confused. They say, he doesn't communicate anymore. What they really mean is, he doesn't give me leverage anymore. Quiet men didn't stop communicating. They stopped over-communicating. They realized that constant explanation trains people to believe they are entitled to access to thoughts, access to emotions, access to reasoning. And quiet men learned that access, once given freely, is rarely respected. So they removed the excess. They stopped explaining choices that were already made, stopped defending boundaries that were already crossed, stopped narrating internal processes to people who weren't responsible for carrying them. This wasn't withdrawal from connection, it was the establishment of privacy. Quiet men value privacy because it preserves clarity. When fewer people are inside your head, your decisions become cleaner. When fewer opinions are consulted, your instincts sharpen. When fewer explanations are required, your energy returns. This is why quiet men often appear more decisive over time. They aren't suddenly confident, they're unburdened. They no longer feel the need to convince others of their right to choose. They choose and move. And when questioned, they don't argue. They simply repeat the decision. That repetition isn't stubbornness, it's self-trust. Quiet men have learned that not everyone deserves the full story. Some people want explanations to feel included. Others want them to feel powerful. Quiet men stop feeding both. They understand that peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from being aligned with yourself. So they speak less and mean more. They don't announce intentions early. They don't debate futures with people who won't be part of them. They don't justify silence when silence is already an answer. And this is where the misunderstanding deepens again. People assume quiet men have shut down emotionally. In reality, They've shut down excess access. They still feel deeply. They still care selectively. They still invest, just not everywhere. They've learned that explanation is a tool, and like any tool, it becomes dangerous when overused. Quiet men stop explaining themselves, not because they have nothing to say, but because they finally learned who they don't need to say it to. Section 7. What happens when quiet men finally walk away? When quiet men finally walk away, it doesn't look like rebellion. There are no speeches, no public declarations, no dramatic exits. From the outside, it barely registers. They don't slam doors. They don't announce boundaries. They don't try to make anyone understand what they're doing. They simply stop compensating, and that's when the consequences begin to surface. Quiet men don't hold systems together loudly. They hold them together invisibly, so when they step back, things don't collapse immediately. They weaken. Deadlines slip slightly. Standards soften. Small problems go unresolved longer than they used to. Nothing catastrophic, just friction. People feel it before they can explain it. Conversations take more effort. Processes feel heavier. Tension escalates faster than it used to. And no one can quite say why, because the men who used to absorb the pressure are still present. They're just no longer absorbing what was never theirs. This is what society misunderstands most about quiet men. When they walk away, they're not abandoning responsibility. They're abandoning excess responsibility. They're not withdrawing from contribution. They're withdrawing from being taken for granted. Quiet men don't leave to make a point. They leave because the point was never acknowledged. They gave consistency. They gave stability. They gave restraint. And when none of that was valued, they recalibrated. This is why the shift feels confusing to those around them. He's still here, but not the same. He used to handle this. He used to step in. Yes. And now he doesn't. Not because he can't, but because he chose not to. That choice is the most dangerous thing quiet men can do, because it reveals how much was being held together by people who never asked for credit. When quiet men walk away, they don't create chaos. They remove the buffer that was preventing it. And without that buffer, systems have to confront their own imbalance. Some adapt. They redistribute responsibility fairly. They recognize contributions they once ignored. They learn to function without silent overextension. Others don't. They look for someone else to quietly carry the weight. But here's the problem. Quiet men who walk away rarely step back into the same role. Once they learn the cost of invisibility, they don't volunteer for it again. They still contribute, but only where there is mutual respect. They still show up, but only where their presence isn't assumed. They still care, but only where care is reciprocated. And if that environment doesn't exist, they're fine without it. This is the final truth society struggles to accept. Quiet men don't need to be seen to survive. They've already learned to live without recognition. But when they choose to walk away, they take with them something irreplaceable. Stability without supervision. Responsibility without complaint. Strength without spectacle. Those things are hard to replace, not because they're rare, but because they require character, not performance. So when people ask where the good men went, or why everything feels more fragile than it used to, the answer isn't dramatic. They're still around. They're just no longer standing in places that forgot their worth. They didn't disappear, they remembered themselves. And once a quiet man does that, he doesn't come back to be invisible again. He builds a smaller world, a quieter one where his effort is balanced, his boundaries are respected, and his silence is understood. That's not rebellion, that's resolution, and that is the fate of the quiet men society forgot. Not collapse, not rage, but deliberate distance. Most men don't need attention, they need understanding. If this spoke to you, subscribe to Psycore. This channel is for men who carry quietly and think clearly.